Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested by a viewer, thanks to Michael Lewis for this one. Amy's graveyard contains 4 Epicenters, and she controls Underworld Breach and Locket of Yesterdays. Amy wants to escape one of the Epicenters and exile the other 3 to do that. How much mana will this cost? Okay, so in order to answer this question, we're going to need to know a little bit about the process for casting a spell. Basically, any time in Magic where you're going to cast a spell, there's a specific sequence of steps that you have to follow in a specific order. Now, the first one of those steps is going to be to take the spell that you're casting and move it from wherever it is onto the stack. So that means that at the time when the Locket of Yesterday's ability is applied, that happens during the step when we're determining the cost to cast the spell. That definitely does happen after the part where we moved the epicenter that we're casting onto the stack. So that means that that one specific epicenter is definitely not going to count towards our total for Locket of Yesterdays, because the first step in casting that spell is going to be to move it out of the graveyard and onto the stack. Okay, so let's see now about the other 3. For our purposes, the next important step that we're going to talk about is the part where we determine the cost to cast the spell. Now, like we said before, that definitely does happen after we move the one epicenter out of the graveyard and onto the stack, but it definitely does happen before we're paying any of the costs to cast the spell. Now that's good news, because Unearth is going to have you exile those epicenters as part of the costs, and so the step where we determine how much the spell costs to cast is going to happen before that. Now, Locket of Yesterdays, when it's applying in this part of this process, is going to see that there are 3 epicenters that are still in our graveyard, and accordingly, it's going to make that the epicenter that we're casting is going to cost 3 less to cast. Now, the other really cool part about this is that when we're in this step, after we've determined what the cost to cast the spell is, it gets locked in, and any stuff that changes in the game after that point is not going to affect the cost at all, even if it might look like it should. So that means that during the next step in the process for casting the spell, the part where we actually get to pay those costs, well, we're going to see 3 of the epicenters getting exiled out of our graveyard. However, the game is not going to go back and say, well, now that there's not 3 epicenters in your graveyard, the spell costs 3 more to cast, because of that rule that we talked about before, where the cost gets locked in. Because we locked the cost in during the previous step, that means that we're not going to see the cost go up, and the epicenter is going to cost 1 and a red to cast, in addition to exiling the other 3 epicenters. Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about related to this question. You might be wondering why I picked Epicenter, and it's not just because it's a cool card with a mana cost that was very convenient for this purpose. There's one other thing that's about this card that makes it really suitable, and of course that's the threshold ability that it has. So, what do you think? Is the threshold ability going to be active or not if the number of cards in our graveyard changes during this process from above to below 7? And unfortunately the answer to that one is that threshold abilities like this one are going to apply as part of the resolution of the spell. It's not going to look at how many cards are in your graveyard until after the spell has been completely cast and when it's starting to resolve. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again tomorrow for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.